It's been a really strong year, but like I say, I feel like they have left some points on the table which stops them from getting an A. Yeah, I think we can only say up to now it's been an F. It's been a fail. It's been a failure. They're getting the highest grade out of everyone. I think I'm going for an A. I just feel like there's been some missed opportunities that stops them from getting that A grade.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Pit Lane Talk, your Formula One podcast that brings you all the latest news from both on and off the track. We're back after a little bit of a hiatus over the past couple of weeks, and we've got a really exciting episode for you today. I'm your host, Abby Nicholson, and I'm joined by Daniel Moxon, the Daily Mirror and Daily Express's F1 correspondent, and also a few friends on your laptop. And yes. Mine too. We have a 2.5-year-old daughter, for those of you who are listening rather than watching, and she has decided to bedazzle both of our laptops with fairy stickers, and I'm pretty sure yours says princess.
Yes, I've been designated a princess for this one, which is nice of her. But yeah, that's what happens when you partially work from home and you've got a 2.5-year-old little girl. Your laptop is inevitably going to get stickers on it.
No, definitely. We're in our sticker era, aren't we, at the moment? But yeah, we do have a really, really exciting podcast today. So for those of you that don't know, this podcast is actually a partner to a Substack newsletter, which Danny runs, called Pit Lane Chronicle, which basically tries to look past the top few teams that we're always talking about all the time. We always talk about the top teams all the time on this podcast. It's just natural for us. But your newsletter actually goes into depth about all of the other teams too, the news that's going on there and things that people might have missed. So we thought to lean into that today. We're going to go through every single team. We're going to do a little bit of a school report and see how we go from here. I think there's a couple of ratings in there, like proper A plus, B sort of vibe.
No one's getting an A plus. No. I'm a strict grader.
Okay. We're going to start from the back. So Cadillac are first up on our list. First season in Formula One, they have 0 points so far, and they've had a fair few reliability issues. What do you make of their first half of the season so far?
Well, I mean, you look at that on paper and you go 0 points. You know, more often than not, at least one car's not finishing most races because of some sort of reliability issue. And you look at that and you go, oh, that's a disaster. But to be honest, I mean, I don't see what else you could really have expected from a brand new team built from scratch. I know, like, for example, Audi, we're going to talk about them in a minute. They're on the grid for the first time this year as well, but they took over an existing operation in Sauber, whereas Cadillac literally had a year from getting their sort of confirmation of their entry into F1 this year to get to build a workforce, to hire people, I mean, you can look at it as just building a car, and they're not building their own engines yet, but you can look at it as just building a car, but they built an entire team in that time. The only expectation for Cadillac, and even from Cadillac for themselves this year, was get on the grid, get 2 cars going. Anything else from there is pretty much a bonus. And that's what they've achieved. So, all right, yes, it's 0 points. Yes, they are breaking down quite a lot more often than they would like to at the moment. But I just think that's to be expected for a team in the stage that they're in. This is very much still an embryonic Formula One team. We're not seeing anything close to what the potential of what they can achieve in Formula One right now. It's just far too early in the process.
Let's have a look at a few of their stats then. So Bottas has had 5 didn't finishes, and his highest finished was 13th in China. Wow, I really slurred my words there. I promise I am okay. Perez has had 4 do not finishes, and his highest is also 14th, which was in Silverstone and Barcelona too.
Although he thought he had a point in Monaco, and then it got taken away with the post-race penalty, which that was a shame. I think everyone wanted to see them get something tangible for their efforts, so that was a bit of a shame.
Did you expect more from either of them personally, Bottas and Perez, or?
It's really hard to assess how they've performed externally because there's no reference for Cadillac to compare themselves to. They're comparing themselves and they're racing against teams that have, some of which have decades of experience in this sport, but all of them at the very least. I mean, Haas was the most recent team to enter, and this is their 11th season in Formula One, so they're vastly experienced compared to Cadillac. So it's really, really hard to judge. Everyone, publicly and privately that I've seen and spoken to at Cadillac seems to be happy with the work that they're doing. There are pretty persistent rumours, more about Valtteri's future than Checo's. I think it's helped that Checo has outqualified Valtteri a little bit more and finished ahead in some more races. But there's a little talk about Valtteri's future, but I've certainly not suggested anything or seen anything concrete to suggest that either of them are at risk.
I don't think that surprises me, you know. I feel like Bottas, it's one of those where I think if he was to make a decision now, I don't think it would necessarily be from the team. I think it might be more from himself. He has been around for quite a while.
He has. I don't think he would have come back into F1 for one season, would be or back onto the grid for one season. They both signed what was advertised as multi-year deals when they first started off. I'd be surprised if there was a change. You can never, I guess, rule it out in Formula One, but they've got two veteran experienced drivers there, and like I say, they're still building themselves on the grid. I think they benefit from having two, they're still quick drivers, but having two sort of old experienced heads that know what they're doing, safe pairs of hands sort of thing. I think they benefit from having the both of them around.
So what's your rating then? What are you giving them?
I call myself a harsh grader at the top of this, and some people might think I'm being a bit generous about this, but I would say it's a B, because I think when you consider it relative to the expectations, like I said, the only expectations were that they went racing this year, and they've done that. They came very, very close to scoring a point, would have scored a point if it not weren't for a post-race penalty for Checo in Monaco, as we mentioned. So I think it's been a solid start for Cadillac. In the second half of the season, I'd like to see them get on top of their reliability issues a bit more, particularly the brake stuff. They keep setting fire to their brakes, which is hardly ideal. But yeah, I'd call it a solid B.
So going on to Aston Martin.
Yeah.
They have had, to put it quite frankly, an awful start to this year. What do you think needs to change there? Just let's break it down. What is going on?
Yeah, just the 1 point scored, and that was, they inherited that because Checo was disqualified in Monaco. So you know, it could be worse for them. They could be dead last with 0 points, while even the new boys would have outscored them. So yeah, I mean, look, we know the amount of investment that's gone into the Aston Martin team, recruiting Adrian Newey to oversee the development of the cars, rebuilding their factory from scratch, pouring hundreds of millions of pounds into that, massive contract for Fernando Alonso to lead them on track. You know, and not the builder and wind tunnel. There's a massive list of ways that Lawrence Stroll has invested in this team with this season in mind, and well, they just got their development all wrong. They got their pre-development. It's, you know, they struck a new engine partnership with Honda, which hasn't yet reaped the rewards that they hoped it would. When you consider that Mercedes have, you know, quite clearly got the best overall power units this season, they left Mercedes to start working with Honda. So
yeah, that's a kick, isn't it?
Well, yeah, this is it. I mean, it's easy to see why they did it, because Honda they're the only team that Honda are supplying, so it's essentially a works team with that partnership with Honda. So and there's benefits to that, being the ones that, you know, we've seen some of Mercedes' customers, we'll come on to them in a minute, that have struggled from being a team that gets supplied engines, because there's a sort of a backlog in terms of the understanding that they have of how best to get them working. So there's benefits to being a works team, and in the long term, hopefully it will continue to benefit them. But right now it's looking a little bit, the Honda engine has been pretty terrible and the Mercedes engine has been good. So Aston Martin, you feel like in the short term would have been better off sticking, but like I say, there are benefits, and hopefully for their sake, they'll come into fruition. But yeah, a massive amount of investment, and the car's been a dud. Fernando and Lance have been driving around at the back, waiting for the big upgrade that came in Hungary, the last race before the summer break, when finally, and it was a good time, I think, to give some sort of green shoots of recovery, to give a little bit of hope, because that upgrade got them an awful lot closer compared to where they were, and there's more on the way on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at their stats too, so Alonso had 4 DNFs, and his highest finish has been 10th in Monaco, but obviously that Monaco race was pretty interesting with all of the points. And for Stroll, it's 6 DNFs, 1 where he wasn't classified, and his highest finish was 13th in Hungary. So things do seem to have turned around, definitely at Hungary.
Yeah.
It's just whether they can keep that momentum and take it through after quite a big pause in the middle of the season. Yeah,
so I mean, on average, on some circuits, they were nearly 5 seconds off per lap or per pace from the leaders, which is just an enormous amount in Formula One. And in Hungary, they'd cut that gap down to about 2 seconds per lap, so that's obviously a significant gain. They still only finished 13th and 14th, never really troubled the points, so clearly there is obviously a lot more that they need to do. But that was only the first stage of the chassis upgrades. What Aston Martin say isn't a B-spec car, but it essentially is. There were many parts of that car that weren't completely redesigned by Adrian, so I'm happy to call it a B-spec car, and I think most people would be. There's more parts on the way. Adrian said somewhere between Monza and Baku, so we're looking at September-ish time before more chassis upgrades come.
Not long.
No, not long at all. And before then, we've got the first Honda power unit upgrade coming at Zandvoort, which they say that it's mostly on the ICE, the internal combustion engine side of it. They've not really looked at the battery too much, but they want to get the base sort of power coming from the ICE, as they call it, at a much better level than it's been. They sorted the reliability issue. They had those horrible reliability issues at the start, didn't they, where the car was literally shaking apart because of the engines. They're obviously bringing a new engine, so let's hope that doesn't reappear as an issue.
Oh, can you imagine? I don't think I can take any more hands off the wheel driving, I don't think.
But in terms of performance, there's certainly a hope that they'll be better off again at Zandvoort, and then, like I say, there's more chassis upgrades coming, and there is scope for another Honda engine upgrade later in the year as well. So there's plenty of upgrades coming for Aston Martin. I think the future, certainly at this point, is looking a lot brighter than it did early in the season. But I was having a chat with Pedro De La Rosa, the team ambassador, former F1 driver, of course, about it, and he was saying to me, look, yes, we're wanting to improve things this season, we want to score as many points as we can this year, but these upgrades, it's really more about having a much stronger baseline for 2027 than they had for this year. So it's these upgrades maybe have next year in mind more than anything, but obviously the more that they can improve and have a little bit of joy on track this year, then the better.
Yeah, so for the second half of the season, would you say you'd almost put their expectations, which sounds absolutely bizarre, but almost at point with Cadillac, just making sure that they have a car that isn't necessarily competitive?
I think maybe a little higher than that. I think they'll want to get into, before the end of the year, I think they'll want to be in a position where they can fight for a point or 2 points on a fairly semi-regular basis. I think they'll want to be a bit better off than Cadillac, because it's quite embarrassing for them that for some time, particularly in recent races, obviously they've made a very conscious decision to not upgrade throughout the season to save their big B spec for Hungary, which meant that they got left behind as other teams did upgrade. So it was very much a conscious decision on their part, but still the fact that Cadillac were at times a couple of seconds quicker than them, that was pretty embarrassing. So they won't want to be behind the car or even fighting with the Cadillacs again, ever, really.
Okay. And we were talking a little bit about a B spec car. I imagine that your grade is going to be a bit further away than a B.
Yeah, I think we can only say up to now it's been an F. It's been a fail. It's been a failure of Aston Martin's whole project. Like I said, this was supposed to be the year that they took that step and took the fight to the leaders at the front, and they've gone completely the other way. So far, an F. There is definitely potential to improve that grade as the season goes on, but right now they've failed. So
going on to Williams, they've missed the Barcelona shakedown. They're overweight. Their upgrades haven't had an impact. It's not James Vowles' plan at all. He was talking so much about how he was trying to develop this team from a couple of years ago to make it into something that was going to be there, going to be battling with the bigger teams. What has gone wrong here? Yeah,
in some ways, some similarities to the Aston Martin story, where it's a team that in the last couple of years has really done well in the midfield and come to the forefront and flattered to deceive almost. They've looked like they've got to go and push on, and then they've just not got things right for this change of regulations, which that can happen when new regs come into force. Some teams excel and some get caught out. And Williams, if I'm to offer something in James Vowles' defence, it's been clear, and he's been very open from the start since he joined there, that their processes, their equipment, their technology, the way that they just go about their work has just been miles off it compared to their rivals there. I remember a couple of years ago when he first started, he was saying that they're 20 years behind other teams in terms of some of their infrastructure and things like this. So, and obviously these things take an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money to fix. So if I'm to offer James Vowles some sort of mitigation, it's very much not an easy job, but the simple fact is they got their development wrong. He was saying earlier in the season that all the solutions were in his inbox, but in a cost cap era, you can't just chuck them on the car, so you need to do it over time. But when they have been putting upgrades on the car over time, they've not had the same effect that they were that basically their correlations off. What they thought they were going to get out of some of these upgrades in the wind tunnel or on the simulator has not necessarily translated to what they've got on track. So that's all when correlation's not there, that's always a sign that there's some deeper issues going on back at the factory. So yeah, a really, really tough year. And the side effect, of course, is they've got two really, really good drivers there in Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz, but they're also both at a point in their career where they're, in early 30s, approaching that sort of thing, where they need to be in quick cars and they're approaching their prime and they want to spend their prime in the fastest car that they possibly can get. And right now they don't have a fast car.
I mean, we saw a little bit of what it was like behind the scenes in Drive to Survive, didn't we? And that moment where James Vowles was left waiting and just how hard it was of a decision for Carlos Sainz.
He spent months deciding. He had offers from Alpine, Audi on the table. We know that, and he chose Williams. He believed in that project, and obviously last year he got a couple of podiums out of it. It was looking like a really good decision. But then, Alpine go to the forefront of the grid. Audi have had we'll come on to them in a minute, with, not the best of starts, but they seem to have built a bit of momentum up, and they've got obviously a massive manufacturer behind them. The Sainz family, his father, also Carlos Sainz Senior, a rallying legend, and has been driving rally cars for Audi for years and years and years. So there's a familial connection there as well. But he took this bold decision to join Williams, and it's too early to make a verdict of it. We can only really assess how it's gone once he eventually leaves Williams, whether that is this year or for next year or 10 years down the line, who knows. But yeah, it's looking difficult for him at the moment, and he's been very open and said that he's considering his options. What options he has out there at the moment, I'm not really sure, because Audi look now pretty set on their driver lineup. Alpine, maybe there'll be something over Franco Colapinto's place that's not quite secure yet, but again, it's not looking especially likely.
It'll be interesting, I think, because obviously last time around, Carlos was the piece of the puzzle that needed to be fit.
Yeah.
It might be the case that he's the opposite way around this time. If Max Verstappen does decide to carry on in Formula One, and if he does decide to leave Red Bull and go to another team, he might be waiting for other pieces to fall into place. Yeah,
the one that might happen for him, we don't know what Fernando Alonso is going to do at Aston Martin just yet. He's considering, he's 45 now, he's considering whether this is going to be his last year driving in Formula One or whether he's going to continue for a bit longer. If he decides to step away, maybe there's a vacancy at Aston Martin. Again, they've obviously struggled too, but maybe Carlos looks at it and goes, which team is the most likely to progress quickest? Maybe he might decide that it's Aston Martin. I don't know. Maybe Aston Martin might not come calling. I'd be surprised if they didn't, if they needed a very experienced lead driver on track. But yeah, there might be an option or two that pops up for Carlos, but certainly the fact that he's been so open about looking elsewhere is never a good sign for Williams.
So having a little look at their stats for the year so far, Carlos Sainz has 2 DNFs and he's had 3 ninth place finishes in Miami, Canada and China. For Albon, 2 DNFs, 1 DNS and 1 not classified, and he's had a highest of 8th in Monaco. What do you want to see from these two over the next half of the season? What do you think needs to improve? Is it them, or is it just a situation of it being the team?
I don't think we can. We've not seen Carlos and Alex have a competitive car really at any point this season. They've got 11 points to show from their first 11 rounds, and that, that's night and day compared to last year, where, like I say, Carlos in the second half of the year grabbed a couple of podiums, and so harsh, and I don't think we really can lay any of the blame at the door of Carlos and Alex, because they've not really had the chance to show what they can do. I think it's 6-5 in Carlos's favour in terms of the points.
Yes, it is, yeah.
In general, Carlos has shown more pace, I think, than Alex. I've been a little bit surprised because Alex when he was the lead driver at Williams, he was really kicking. And even last year at the start of the season, yes, Carlos was settling in, but Alex really, really took the fight to him and
put his foot down.
He did, he really did. And then, just ever since, I really want to see Alex kick on, and we haven't quite had that. So I do want to see a little bit more from Alex overall, but I think first the important thing to do is actually put him in just a bit of a quicker car, and he just hasn't had it.
And what's your grade?
Again, I think like Aston Martin, we can only say that this has really been a failure for Williams, unfortunately.
You are a harsh grader.
Can only grade what's in front of me, I'm afraid.
Going on to, I was going to say Aldi. Going on to Audi here. So they've got 12 points between, so just 1 further ahead than Williams. Bortoletto got points on opening day, but it's been slow going after that. Some reliability issues, isn't there?
Yeah, just leapfrogged Williams on the final race just before the summer break. But that's it. Yeah, it was. They started well with points in their Audi's first ever race in F1. But although, like we said, they took over an existing team, so they had plenty of infrastructure there already. But yeah, Gabriele Bortoletto's done the lion's share of the point scoring up to now. I don't think that is necessarily much of a reflection on Nico Hülkenberg, because even though he's the more experienced driver, and you would always expect someone of Nico's standing coming up against not a rookie but someone in their second season F1. On paper, it doesn't look like Nico's been doing that great, but he's been very unlucky in some circumstances. He's finished 11th a lot as well, which is the worst place to
Not
finish,
a lucky
really.
number.
No, it's a bad lucky number to have in Formula One. Is number 11. So yeah, he's. I don't think the points total for Nico reflects the performances he's put in so far. I think they've done pretty tidily. There was, like I say, they had a strong start on debut, then they had a big, long run of races where they didn't score any points, but then it seems to have really clicked for them in these last 3 race weekends before the summer break. Points in all of them. Nico's finally off the mark. Gabrielle's been doing really, really well. I think it's a solid start to life in F1 for Audi. They were saying as well, Alan McNish, the person who was leading things there since Jonathan Wheatley, very...
Can I ask a little bit about that? Do you think that this turn of events is anything to do with the departure of Jonathan Wheatley?
Yeah, it was a really weird one, because he was talking about how much he loved, he'd moved to Switzerland and everything like that. He talked about how much he loved life living over there and things like this. He'd finally been a team principal after sporting director for so long at Red Bull. There was a ceiling there, because I mean, at the time when he left, Christian Horner was in charge, and it didn't look like he was going anywhere. Well, it didn't look like he was going anywhere. But yeah, he was finally, the man in charge, and he seemed to be loving life there, and it came very, very surprisingly that he'd left. But we from what we understand, he will be joining Aston Martin. In what role, we don't know. It doesn't look like it's going to be a team principal role, because they don't really have that. That's not their management structure. They don't actually have a team principal, which is an interesting way of doing things. That isn't likely to be confirmed until he's negotiated the full terms of his departure from Audi, which is still very much an ongoing process. But yeah, I mean, that certainly is going to have thrown things up in the air, because Audi recruited him as their long-term sort of project leader along with Mattia Binotto. And then very, very suddenly, what was it? It was 2 races into the season, I think it was. And then he just very suddenly tells the team that he's leaving. So... that definitely will have thrown things into flux, but Alan McNish, who was already part of the project, has stepped up. Very, very experienced operator, former F1 driver, but more well-known for his rallying. He's
very well-liked, isn't he, from what I
Le
understand?
Mans, sorry.
He's really well-liked.
Yeah, he's very well-respected as well, Alan. One of those where he sort of gets along with everyone quite well. And yeah, he was saying that up to now, they've exceeded the expectations that they thought they'd have for the first half of their year. So they seem happy with where they're at the moment. Like I said, there was a big pointless run there, but they seem to have turned things around before the summer break. A solid, if unspectacular, start from Audi, I would say.
And just having a little look at their stats. So Bortoletto's had 1 race where he didn't start, and he's had 2 8th places there, his best finishing positions. Yeah. Hülkenberg has had 3 DNFs, 1 DNS, and he's had a 9th place in Hungary as well. What are you rating the start of Audi's season so far, then? Yeah,
as some of those DNFs show, they've had some reliability problems as well. I think, like I said, I think solid, if unspectacular, is the way to go. So I think a C is it's a pass grade. They've done okay, but for we'd like to see something a bit more from them.
See, when I initially saw your ratings, I saw that obviously you gave Cadillac a B, and then you gave Audi a C. And I know we spoke about it a little bit before the pod, and we spoke about it on the pod as well, but can you just explain that for people?
Yeah, because I get it, because Audi have scored 12 points and given them a C, Cadillac have scored no points and given them a B. I think it's just relative to the... yes, they're the 2 new teams on the grid, but like I said, Audi they had a head start in that they had a team that they took over, whereas Cadillac have built from scratch. So I think the expectations of each of those teams has to be relative. And I think Cadillac, relative to where they were, have probably done a little better than expected. Audi, I think they're about where I would expect them, and I think where most would expect them to be, which is why they get the C. It's a pass grade, but we want to see a bit more from them. So that's why, even though they've scored more points, they've got a lower grade from us at this point.
Okay, I'll let it go then. Heading on to Haas, they had such a positive start to the season.
They did.
17 points, but it just seems to have dwindled a little bit towards the start of the summer break. What are your thoughts on what's going on there?
Yeah, it was crazy because with the cancellation of those 2 Middle Eastern races, they were heading into Miami, their first home race of the year, 4th in the Constructors' Championship, ahead of Red Bull.
Yeah.
little old Haas all the way up there getting nosebleeds. And I don't mean that in a sort of condescending way at all, because
great thing.
They've just got so much less resource than any other team. You know, even now, like I said, they've been on the grid for a decade, but they're still, even with Cadillac and everything coming in, they're still the only team on the grid that doesn't reach the budget cap in Formula 1.
Yeah.
They can't spend as much as other teams can. The headcount of their workforce, most teams these days have got 1,000 members of staff and up. Cadillac have already got, I think, sort of 600-700 members of staff.
Wow.
Haas's headcount, you're looking at more about 400 for an established, like I say, a team that's been on the grid for a decade, but they don't have the spending to go beyond that resource. They need more investment. And Io Komatsu, the team principal, has been very upfront about that. It's his job, one of his main priorities right now, is to try and attract more investment into the team, because right now they just can't spend what they need to keep up with the competition. And that's reflected in, as I said, they had a brilliant start. They built a really good car, or a really good starting base for a car. And so in Australia and in China, they went really, really well. Ollie Behrman scored 17 points from those first 2 races. He scored 1 more since.
Yeah.
Esteban Ocon scored 3 points overall all year. And they've just been outdeveloped because they've not been able to bring the same number, anywhere near the same number of parts as their competitors, as their rivals. So they're bringing parts at a bigger rate. They're finding more performance on those weekends as a result, and Haas are just getting left behind, unfortunately.
I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but what is the issue there? Is it just that, is it to do with commercial like sponsors and things like that? Because arguably, like, I know the Gunter Steiner had this problem as well. And I mean, who do you want to put your brand onto as one of the team principals? It's going to be one of those that is outspoken and people like, and Gunter is exactly that person. If he was in the team and they were still struggling with that aspect, like why is it so different to the other teams?
I mean, he might have helped a little bit commercially, particularly in America, because he's, again, Drive to Survive. He was one of the sort of main characters of that show, if you want to call it that. So
smash my door.
Yeah. Although a bit more sweary than that. But that might have helped, having maybe commercially. But I mean, Io's he's less known, but he's a very well respected operator within F1. He knows how to get the most out of a team, but unfortunately we're seeing sort of Haas's limit right now. And again, I don't mean this as a criticism of the team, it's just the complete lack of resources. They've literally got less than half of the headcount of most other teams on the grid in terms of staff. They can't spend as much as the rest of the team. They're tens of millions potentially away from the cost cap that they're not able to put into development. So Io put it quite well when he said, well, like, we've almost been doing it with continue to do it with one hand tied behind our back, and that's just the reality that Haas living in right now. They've got a sponsor partnership with Toyota Guzzi Racing, and that goes beyond just money. They put on testing days, and Haas work with, and they swap engineers as well, and there's more going on there behind the scenes. But in terms of bringing in the investment that they want and need, Haas need to find more significant commercial partners.
And just going on to the stats for Haas as well, Ollie Behrman's had 3 DNFs and obviously had a 5th place in China. Ocon hasn't had any DNSs or NCs. And I thought, wow, is he the only one to do that? But Hamilton is the only actual driver to finish every single lap of a race, isn't he?
Yes.
So he's in good company, to be fair. He's just not quick enough to not be lapped.
This is the thing, and he's got a lot of experience in F1 now, and Ollie Behrman's only in his 2nd full season, and Ollie has sort of just outclassed Esteban a little bit. And I think out of everyone on the grid at the moment, Esteban is the one that's fearing for his future a little bit.
Yeah, we've spoken about that a couple of times on the last few podcasts, if you want to go and look at that in a little bit more detail. But for now, what is your grade? Yeah,
this was one of the more difficult ones, because again they started really strongly, and then just ever since then it's been quite poor results wise. But like I said, there's a lot of mitigation for them, so I think I've gone for a C again, in that it's not been a fantastic season, but I think they're doing about as well as they can with what they have at the moment. Haas.
So going on to Alpine, they had a really, really strong start of the year. They were the best of the midfield for a while. But it just seems like, again, things have just been dwindling off. Are we waiting for some upgrades, or is there something else going on in the background there?
Yeah, a lack of resource certainly isn't in there. That's not affecting them. They've got the resource behind it, and yeah, they start the season really, really well. Flavio Briatore made it very clear at the season launch that he expected big things from them this year, and they lived up to that in the first, I think, 7 rounds of the year. They were scoring really, really well.
61 points as well, worth mentioning.
Yeah, got that podium in Monaco. Although that's all still a little bit. We haven't really heard anything because that's been they successfully won that appeal, Alpine, to get Gasly's thing restored, and then
they've got the trophy now, haven't they?
They have the trophy, yeah. But then we heard that I think it was McLaren and Red Bull were going to challenge it legally, and then we've not really heard anything since from that. So that's all still a little up in the air. But as it stands, they're the only team out of the big 4 that's had a podium this year. Mm-hmm. And Pierre Gasly, quite a popular podium sitter as well. He's a very popular guy. Strong start, but again, they've been very much in a fight with Racing Bulls from the get go. In terms of vying to be what they call best of the rest informally, basically the team that finishes 5th in the midfield, just because resource wise, the top 4 teams are just too far ahead. But yeah, like I said, the first few rounds it looked like Alpine had the upper hand on that, and they did have the upper hand on that. But they're the first to admit they have been outdeveloped, and that will really irritate Flav because, like he says, he's got the resource. I saw an interview with him from last week. I think it was with The Race, where he was saying, I don't know why we aren't beating McLaren and why we aren't beating Ferrari with the resources that we have. And I mean, the obvious answer is, well, your car's not quick enough, mate. but obviously it's a bit more nuanced than that. But at the end of the day, their development hasn't been as strong as it needs to be, and Racing Bulls have overtaken them.
So having a look at the stats for Alpine at the moment, Gasly's got 1 DNF and his best was 3rd in Monaco. Still really sad that we didn't get to see him on the podium there. It would have been a really nice moment.
Yeah.
And Colapinto's had no DNFs either, and his best has been 6th place, which he got in both Monaco and Canada. You want to just see them get back to where they were at the start of this year. Maybe they've got a little bit of development around the corner that'll get them there, but at the moment, I think Racing Bulls are they're going really, really well. Obviously, they've got their own section that we'll talk about them in, but I don't know if I can see them getting there, especially with Red Bull also having the opportunity to do some upgrades too, or Racing Bulls, pardon me.
Yeah. Like I say, it was a strong start, but they've only got 4 points from their last 4 races heading into the summer break. They do have more parts on the way, as you say, but then again, every team does. This is the thing. It's going to be about, it's that correlation that I mentioned earlier. It's going to be who can get their new parts to behave on track as well as they do in the sim and in the wind tunnel and this sort of thing. So, and Alpine need to do a bit better on that front. That's where they've been let down a little bit in terms of their upgrades.
And what's your grade?
I have put them as a B up to now because, if we were just talking about the last few races, it would be a lower grade than that, but it was a really, really strong start. And I think, like I said, the fact that they're the only team that has a podium that isn't one of the big 4 teams, I think that works in their favour as well. So a B, maybe a B minus if we were sticking some of those in there. But
I think I'd stick with a B.
Let's not overcomplicate it. Let's not overcomplicate it.
So we're heading on to Racing Bulls now. They were okay at the start, but have developed really, really well. Lawson and Lindblad have got 8 points out of 8. I need to say that again, don't I? They got points out of 8 of the 11 weekends that they have done so far. And I think I'm just going to put my opinion in here. I think their team seems so relaxed. It has for the last couple of years. And when you look at all of them on the grid, I don't know whether it's their silly TikTok videos or whatever.
Their social media game is strong.
Oh, it is fantastic. But it just seems like they're both really chill. They're both really happy with what they're doing, where they are, and I think that comes off on track.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would be happy with where you are. Especially, I mean, Arvid's got a really, really great start to life in F1 on his hands. He's been given a good car. He's been put up against a teammate in Liam who, I mean, Liam's done well this season, don't get me wrong, but he's up against Liam who, he had that whole thing where he was promoted to Red Bull for 2 races, came back into the team, was then beaten by Hadjar, who was a rookie. I don't want to be overly harsh on Liam, but if I was a rookie coming into F1, I wouldn't be overwhelmed or made nervous by the fact that Liam Lawson's in the other car next to me. Like I say, that might sound a little harsh on Liam, but I just, I think it's a good time for Arvid to have come in. And I mean, here's the thing, like, if we're going through the points, sorry, I know that you've been doing this for a thing, but,
That's okay.
but Liam scored 43, Arvid scored 23. Liam's almost scored twice the number of points as that. On paper, it looks like Liam's been schooling Arvid a little bit, but I mean, that's what you would expect out of a driver with a couple of years of F1 experience under his belt, whereas Arvid's just coming as an 18-year-old straight into the sport.
19 now.
He is 19 now, but all of the driving was while he was still 18.
Yeah.
But yeah, Liam has that experience. But then when you look, like I say, he's got a lot more points. But when you look at qualifying, Arvid's been pretty quick too. And then you look at actual race pace, I think Arvid's actually been slightly quicker. I think it's something like 0.017 on average pace per lap, faster than Liam. Although Liam's been getting the lion's share of the results. And it is a results game. So it's great that Liam's been doing that. And he is the best of the rest that I mentioned earlier. He's the one in 9th in the Drivers' Championship, the driver with the highest total that's not driving for one of the top 4 teams. But in terms of actual pace, Arvid Lindblad has come in, hit the ground running straight away. And once he's got a bit more experience under his belt, once he knows a little bit better how not to make those very simple mistakes that you can make on track, like putting a bit too much into the first couple of laps and things like that, destroying your tyres, that sort of thing. Once Arvid learns those things that Liam has been able to learn due to experience, I wonder if we might see a little bit of a swap around in terms of who's leading the charge on track at that team.
No, I think I really, really agree with that. And as well, just talking a little bit about Arvid, if I was to give him a specific grade on his own, I'd be giving him an A- or a B+, because coming in on your rookie season, being there or thereabouts with your teammate, and just even these other drivers, yes, they obviously don't have the car beneath them, and that is part of the issue, but he's up there and fighting with some of the most well-known, well-respected F1 drivers, and he's waving at them in the window. Like, in literally in his mirrors, he's waving at them. So I think he should be really, really proud of everything that he's been doing.
Yeah, no, he's done well. He's got the speed. He's got a little bit of arrogance, which I think you kind of need to do well at this level. I think it's been a strong start.
Yeah, he's had 2 7ths in Monaco and the British Grand Prix, and Lawson has had only 2 results out of the top 10, and his best finish has been 6th. So I think it's one of those where it's definitely more to come, isn't it? What grade are you giving them?
Yeah, I've gone for they're getting the highest grade out of everyone. I think I've gone for an A. I would have gone, again, if we were doing pluses and minuses, I would have said maybe an A-. But yeah, it's been, Racing Bulls have done about as well as you could expect them to. They're the best team in the midfield. They've got more stuff on the way. They look to be quite considerably ahead of Alpine at the moment as well. Well on track to finish at the top of the midfield.
So before we go into our main guys right at the top, it's probably best that I mention our sponsor, Gulliver's Sports Travel. Big moments, packed grandstands, and a championship battle that is heating up. When Formula One season delivers like this, watching from home just isn't the same as being there when the lights go out. With Gulliver's Sports Travel, you can experience the most iconic races on the Formula One calendar live. Enjoy tickets, hand-picked hotels, and seamless travel with one of the UK's leading sports travel specialists. Don't just watch the action, experience it live. Visit gulliverstravel.co.uk and secure your place today. Right, going into our top 4 then, let's start with Red Bull. Last year, if you'd have been asking me who would be 4th place, I would not have been saying Red Bull at all. No. They had obviously very slow start to this year. Things have been getting better, but not without Max Verstappen complaining every second of the way. Let's get into it a little bit more.
Yeah, poor GP's ears. Over this.
But he's glad he's leaving.
His ears will be, for sure. Max has had a lot of complaints about the car. Although, like I said, a slow start, but particularly in recent weeks, the car has been fast.
Yeah.
It's just been very hard to drive. That car's always been hard to drive, but Max has been able to tame it quite well, and it's usually the second driver that's suffered. I don't know if it's necessarily because Laurent Marquis, I think he's definitely had much more of an emphasis than Christian Horner ever did of trying to make it a 2-man team again. Or a 2-car team, I should say. And I don't know if part of his efforts to do that around the design of the car have maybe not worked so much in Max's favour, which is why he's unhappy with it. And because Isaac's not been fully happy with the car either, but he seems to have been a little happier with it. So I wonder,
just not complaining.
I wonder if it's less about how difficult it is to drive and maybe a little bit more that it's just not how Max wants it. Then again, there have obviously been serious issues like the Macarena, or their version of the Macarena rear wing. The fact that hasn't been closing properly, that's caused Max to spin off track, I think, 3 times now. So that's obviously a pretty significant development issue that they've had there. I think Max has still got 4 podiums out of it. He hasn't won a race yet this season, which is bizarre to say. Max Verstappen, that hasn't happened since 2020 was the last time he did it, so 21 he was champion for 4 years in a row, and then even last year he only just missed out. So the fact that he hasn't won a race by the summer break is very bizarre. Very bizarre. But yeah, that's just the situation that we're in at the moment, and there's a lot of talk about Max's future, of course, and yeah, we'll see where that goes.
It was really interesting as well. While I was prepping for the pod and sorting out all my stats, I was looking through each individual driver's rankings where they've been in the season so far. And we were both saying how interesting it was looking at Max's finishes and things like that, trying to guess who it was, and you would never ever guess that it was Max Verstappen. So just to go into those figures a little bit more, Max has had 3 DNFs. All of his finishes have been in the top 10, and he's had 2 second places, Austria and Hungary, of course. And Isaac has had 2 DNFs, 1 result out of the top 10, and his best has been a 4th in Monaco, 3rd, 4th, wherever it ends up in the end.
Yeah.
But there's definitely work for them to do.
Sure.
Whether that is in the garage or on the track, or just maybe trying to do a sponsored silence, maybe Max.
Just turn his radio off for the weekend. And Isaac as well. We haven't really mentioned him. We should, because it's been a really strong start. He's come in, and like I said, Liam Lawson only lasted 2 races. Yuki Tsunoda then did the rest of the season, but did basically nothing. Checo, spent a few years as Max's teammate and won a few races, but particularly towards the end, it was really, really tough for him. And then even, Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly going all the way back to 2018. It's been a long time since Max had... And he still doesn't have a teammate that's taking the fight to him. Max is still very comfortably the top driver there. But Isaac has had a very, very strong start. Very unlucky to not have his first podium under his belt, that whole Monaco mess. But 68 points scored. Max is on 109. That's, it's not a massive amount of points difference between them. And again, the pace, unless Isaac's made a mistake or something like that, is usually just been that sort of few tenths of a second behind that Red Bull want from their second driver. So I think Isaac's ticked a lot of the boxes. So I think we should definitely point that out. It's been a strong start to life as a Red Bull driver for him.
Absolutely. I think that by the end of this year, we're going to see him on the podium once, maybe even twice. I think he's done an absolutely excellent job so far. He's got the car. He's got the right frame of mind.
Yeah.
I think he's in the exact perfect place that he needs to be right now.
The problem that Red Bull do have, of course, is that as far as the FIA's whole ADUO engine thing is concerned, is that they have the highest rated power unit on the grid, which means they're not allowed to bring any engine upgrades. And that is and you can only lay that at Laurie McKee's door. That's a political failure.
Yeah.
Because, every team, and clearly Mercedes have been lobbying and things like this and doing things in the background to make it so that their engines, which overall as a package is very clearly the best on the grid, wasn't graded as such by the FIA so that they would be allowed to make upgrades. And that's the sort of political nous. You feel like if Christian was still in charge, obviously things got very toxic at the end there, and a lot of things have definitely improved at Red Bull through Christian's absence. But you just get the feeling that if Christian was still in charge, he had the political sort of nous to make sure that Red Bull wouldn't have been caught out in the way that they have. I don't necessarily mean that as a criticism of Laurent, because I'm not suggesting that he's, green or anything like that. But at the same time, I do feel like Red Bull have been a little bit caught out on that front, and it could, particularly later in the year, come back to bite them.
Yeah, he was very good at the political game, wasn't he, Christian Horner? Very outspoken.
Yes. Made a lot of enemies, but that's part of the reason why I find it so tough to get back into Formula 1 these days.
Exactly. If he gets in, you just know he's going to have been working on that tirelessly for a while. So heading on. Oh, actually, I nearly missed you grading. What are you grading them?
I was caught between a C and a B, but I've gone for a C.
Okay. Why are you going for a C rather than a B?
I just think, like I say, that. Well, I mean, again, if we're doing it relative, they've performed worse than they have for quite a few seasons now in terms of their actual results. They're barely doing enough to keep Max around at the moment. Like I say, there's that potential failure with the engines that could cost them going forward. It's been an okay season, and a lot of kudos has to go to them for building the best internal combustion engine, because obviously they're making their own engines for the first time this year. So they've achieved quite a bit. But there's been a few failures that brings the grid down.
Absolutely. And on to McLaren, who have had the weirdest year, I think. We've been saying how bizarre it is that we hardly touch on them in this podcast sometimes, despite Lando Norris being the reigning champion. Very, very patchy compared to last year. Strong start in Miami, but it just hasn't gone on from there. What's going on?
Yeah, patchy is the word, I think, because like we say, not the strongest starts of the season, but again, they're a customer of Mercedes. They were always going to be a little bit behind before understanding how to get the best out of those engines and stuff on track. Miami, they brought upgrades there. It looked like they'd really kicked on, or they were in a position to really kick on from that point, where Lando won the sprint race, almost won the Grand Prix, but Kimi Antonelli held him off towards the end. And then it just didn't, the natural progression that we expected almost from there just didn't happen.
Yeah.
And we've come to expect this McLaren team. The last couple of years, they've won the Constructors' Championship both times, 2 seasons in a row. And a big factor behind that has been their development. It's been really, really strong. Whenever they've brought upgrades to the track, pretty much 100% of the time they've worked as expected. They've not quite had that same level of, development this season. It's not always necessarily worked as they would hope to when they brought it on track. The one difference being in Hungary, where they brought big upgrades and they won the race. Yeah. They were much better. They were on it. Probably would have been a 1-2 if Piastri didn't have a mechanical failure that caused him to pull over at the side of the road in the latter half of that race. So, we need to be wary. It could be a false dawn, a bit like Miami was. We expected them to kick on from there. They didn't. So we'll see where they go after the summer break. But they certainly ended the first half of the season on a high. And yeah, we talk about it on this podcast all the time. We want the more teams that we can fighting at the very sharp end of the grid. So hopefully McLaren are joining that fight. But we can only judge them on what they've done so far. And what they've done so far has been a little underwhelming compared to the last couple of seasons.
It's so interesting, isn't it? With this new generation of cars, everyone's almost been put back to square one. So it's really showing who has a fantastic facility back at their base and how well they can work and how the different engineers work together too, which is I found it really, really interesting from that standpoint.
Yeah, and just on that reset as well, I was saying last year when Lando won the title, I said, is this possibly the worst time for him to become world champion? Because you're just doing it just as you're going into a full regulations reset. And, he's not out of it, but it doesn't look likely that he's going to retain that title. We'll see how McLaren kick on in the second half of the year. But we've seen previously Max, like I say, won 4 in a row. Before that, Lewis won 6 out of 7 or whatever it was, with Nico punctuating that in the middle. It tends to be quite a dynastic sort of thing in recent times, whereas Lando won it in 25, but then there's been this whole reset that's just come at just the wrong time for him.
Especially in more recent history, it's you either win once or you do a block together, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
We'll see where it goes from there. Just having a little look at their stats. So Norris has had 2 DNFs and 1 DNS. All results have been in the top 10, and obviously he has that win at Hungary. Piastri, 2 DNSs and 1 DNF. The 2 DNSs after each other right at the start of the season, which was awful for him, but quite funny to watch, especially as he was being a fan.
Yeah, well, especially as a guy from Melbourne as well. He's not had an awful lot of luck at his home race. So I think just once he just wants to show up at his home race and just have a quiet weekend. That'd be quite nice.
He's had 2 results out the top 10 though, which isn't exactly what you want to be having as one of the top teams, and his highest has obviously been second in Japan. I think he's been a little bit underwhelming this year, hasn't he, Oscar? And there's also been a bit of drama going on in the press about his future too.
There has, I don't know if the two are necessarily related, but yeah, Oscar hasn't quite caught the eye in the same way. Over the last year, he made a really, really strong start, and he led the championship for 6 months, and then kind of all fell apart a little bit at the end. And I don't know if some of his form this season has been a continuation of that. I'm not really sure. But yeah, he's for most of last year, up until maybe the very end, there was very little to choose between Oscar and Lando. Either one of them could have won on any given weekend. Whereas so far this year, Lando has just looked a little bit of a step ahead. It may just be the case of a little bit like at Mercedes, we'll talk about them in a minute, where George Russell's been saying that these new cars suit Kimi a bit better than he does. There may be some of that in play.
Bit of confidence.
Oscar
from Norris as well.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, we know Lando is very much a confidence being. If he's full of it, he's in his pomp. If he's lacking confidence, he'll start making mistakes. Yeah. So that definitely is a factor. Oscar has been quite outspoken about these new cars. He doesn't seem to very much enjoy driving them very much. So some of that could be at play. But yeah, I definitely don't think we've seen the best of Oscar Piastri so far this season.
And what are you rating McLaren?
I've gone for a C as well, just because, again, if we're doing it relatively, they've come from dominating and winning the Constructors' Championship with whatever it was, 6 rounds to go or 7 rounds to go last year, to just being off it. And again, the fact that they're a customer hurts them, because they were always going to be a bit behind Mercedes on that. The fact that they're getting a lot less data than the works team is getting. But just a touch underwhelming, I think.
Yeah. Heading on to Ferrari, it's nice to actually have some really good things to say about Ferrari this year after last year. It's one of them where, like, on paper, yes, you'd look and see that they were further up the Constructors' Championship, but they weren't where they wanted to be. It seemed a little bit of a mess behind the scenes. The strategy was everywhere, as it has been for the last few years, whereas this year there's something different about that garage. I think they've got really innovative development. The engines are improving, but there are obviously a few missed chances that they have had this year.
Very true. On the development part of it, definitely is, they've been the ones that have brought some really, really cool design ideas, frankly. Right from the beginning, pre-season testing, the little winglet at the back. Obviously, they were the first to bring and to show the Macarena wing off where it's slipping upside down. They've really thought outside the box on some parts of it, and their performance has been good. They consistently throughout the first half of the season have felt that they've got the best chassis on the grid, and a lot of the data supports that hypothesis. They've just been lacking a little bit on the engine front, which is why Mercedes have been the ones that have won the most. But they've built a good car, and like you say, behind the scenes there's been some chopping and changing. Lewis Hamilton very much driving that on his side of the garage as well. Just felt that was somewhere that they were really struggling with last season in that pretty horrible first year he had with Ferrari. He wasn't necessarily vibing with the people that he was working directly with. So Fred Vasseur took that on board, made some changes that he wanted to make, and we've definitely seen a much brighter, much stronger Lewis come out of that. So credit to Lewis for pulling himself out of that, and credit to Fred Vasseur as well. I think for, sometimes as a leader, you've just got to listen to the people that are working for you, and Lewis was saying, look, I'm not feeling good here, something needs to change. Fred's listened and he's getting more performance out of it as a result. So yeah, credit to Fred. Ferrari looking a lot stronger, and like you say, it's always nice to see a strong Ferrari. I think a strong Ferrari is good for Formula One. I think I would have liked to have seen a little bit more. They've got 1 win each, 1 Lewis win, one Charles win. I feel like they've had, like you say, they've left points on the table a little bit. Lewis in particular, the last few races, a few unnecessary penalties that have cost him a little bit, and as a result he's 50 points behind Kimi Antonelli heading into the summer break, whereas I think he could have been a little bit closer. But overall, I think a strong first half of the season from Ferrari, provided that they kick on from here.
And I think as well, talking about the changes in Lewis's side of the garage, it does really show he is literally the only driver to have completed every single lap of this season so far. Yes, that some might say that that's down a little bit to luck, with the car not having any issues and things like that, but I think it's also a testament to him. It
is, and I mean, well, on the reliability side of it first, their reliability has definitely been better than the direct competitors around them. Mercedes, that's been the big factor for them, really. They probably should have done a lot more than they have. But Ferrari's reliability has been really, really strong. And like you say, Lewis, there's been a lot fewer mistakes. He's taken his opportunities when he's had them. He finally got, he's had a few podiums, but he was waiting for that first podium. He got that out of the way. Then that first win came in Barcelona as well. And yeah, I think, again, a little bit like McLaren, we all thought, right, he's got that win now. Let's see Lewis kick on a little bit. And he hasn't obviously won since. And in a lot of those races since, you just kind of feel like there's been a few little mistakes and a few little things left on the table. But in general, it's been, great to see a much happier Lewis Hamilton on the grid, because, again, it's always good for Formula One or for any sport when its top stars are really firing. So, and Lewis is obviously one of the top ones.
So before we go into the grading there, here are some of the stats for Ferrari. Hamilton, as we said, only driver to start and finish every single lap. He's had 1 win and 5 podiums. Charles has had 2 DNFs, all of his finishes have been in the top 8, and he's had 1 win and 4 podiums. So what are you rating him? Them.
I was really struck. I know I was saying earlier on I'm not doing minuses and pluses, but I've gone for a B+ for Ferrari just because
you must have been struggling.
I really was. I was struggling between an A and a B, and I thought both of them was harsh, so I went between the two.
Yeah.
307 points scored there, 72 off Mercedes at the moment, the Constructors' Championship, which, considering that takes both drivers' points totals, that's a very achievable gap if they can get things right in the second half of the year. It's been a really strong year, but like I say, I feel like they have left some points on the table, which stops them from getting an A.
So heading on to our final team here, Mercedes. If you've got this far into the video, congratulations. Have they lived up to what we thought they were going to be this year is my main question for you.
It's a hard one to answer, really, because it's, when you're answering living up to the billing, because they were the preseason favourites, and they've won 8 out of 11 Grands Prix so far, which is a pretty dominant return. And they started off with quite a few in a row, but then, particularly as we've got more towards this summer, they seem to have lost ground a little bit to Ferrari, to McLaren, who have really come to the fore in the last bit of it. Only 2 wins from their last 5 Grand Prix. Not really the sort of return that they would have been looking for in that particular mini period. And like we said, Ferrari's reliability has been excellent. Mercedes, not so much. They've thrown away quite a lot of points through things falling apart on Kimi's car. He's had a couple of, one DNF, and then one might as well have been a DNF at Silverstone with the front wheel flap sort of thing that kept breaking off. And then on George's car, he's had a persistent engine deployment problem that affected 3 or 4 races. Some other bits as well. His car blew up while he was leading in Canada, for example. They've left a lot of points behind. They should be a lot further ahead than they are. Which, most of this answer's been quite negative when we still have to compare. They're leading the championship. Yeah. Kimi Antonelli's leading the championship by 50 points. It's been a very, very good first half of the year. But at the same time, you just can't help but feel like it probably should have been a lot better if they'd have got the reliability sorted.
I think the main issue that I have with that is that they were so dominant.
Yeah.
Those first few races, they were so dominant. But we do have to remember that was them just bringing their first car. And as everyone brings their upgrades and things like that, everyone is going to improve a little bit more. So I imagine it is natural for them to not be...
And they haven't developed as much as some of their rivals. Yeah. They're saving, because obviously everyone's on a budget cap, they're saving a lot of it for the second half of the year, I think.
But also they haven't needed to.
They haven't needed... I think they're, like I said, because they've only won 2 of the last 5, I think they're starting to approach that period now where they do need to.
Yeah.
Because Ferrari have developed very aggressively. I don't think there's been many weekends, if any, where they haven't brought at least something for the car. They've been developing very much as they've been going along. Mercedes have been more deliberate about it, and that means that they've brought less. And that could, and they will hope that will benefit them in the second half of the season. But yeah, like I say, up to now, it's a very strong start. They're in a good position, but they could have been in a better one, I think, yeah.
And looking at their stats then, so you've already mentioned Kimi had 1 DNF, 1 result out of the top 10, 6 wins and 9 podiums, which is very, very impressive for someone only in their second Formula 1 season.
Yeah.
George Russell, 2 DNFs, 1 finish out of the top 10, 2 wins and 5 podiums.
And that's been the weird thing, because we all expected George to be the leader as the by far most experienced driver, and it's just been the complete swap around of it. And like I mentioned earlier, George has been saying these cars don't necessarily suit him so much as Kimi, in his opinion. And he has had that long-running engine issue that's cost him in these last few rounds. But yeah, just in general, as much as he's had quite a lot of bad luck, there's also that saying of you make your own luck, and it has up to now been a bit of a missed opportunity for George. Obviously, it's still a long season, there's a long way to go. He's only 59 points behind. That's still more than 2 full Grand Prix victories. Yeah. It's a long way back, but he's not out of it just yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, is he still in with a chance? I think he is, and I think arguably the top 6 or 7 of them could still be in with a chance if we look back to last year and there's a significant run of form. What do you think?
No, I agree. Kimi's got a healthy lead, and it's very much his to lose at this point. But you only have to look at it last year, and Max came from more than 100 behind and finished only 2 off Lando in the end. All it takes is one big upgrade at one of the teams that puts them sort of head and shoulders above the rest for a prolonged period of time, which is entirely possible. One of them just might find that they sometimes talk about there's no silver bullets in this game. There isn't, but one big upgrade can make a massive difference on your season if it works well. So we could see someone come out, like you say, from that sort of maybe top 6 or 7, right down to sort of Max and maybe not Oscar. I don't think we've seen enough from Oscar this season to suggest that he's really on it.
Unless he comes back with literal fire
coming
out the back of his car.
You never know.
Good fire. Fast fire.
I was going to say,
That's what I meant.
I think he's sick of fire coming out of his car at the moment. But the first couple of races back I think we'll see a lot from out of those races as to who's really in a position to kick on. But yeah, as it stands, I think we're very open to maybe 6, maybe 7, but 6 drivers potentially still being in this.
And what's your grade for Mercedes to finish this off?
I couldn't split them from Ferrari. I really couldn't. So I've gone for the same B+ again, where it's been a really strong start to the season. And yes, they're 72 points better off than Ferrari, so this might seem weird. But relative to the car and the engine and the potential that they've had, I just feel like there's been some missed opportunities that stops them from getting that A grade.
Yeah. I think that your ratings are spot on for that, because I would agree that Racing Bulls have been very, very impressive this year. They're the ones who have come out on top for us with an A. I think that if Alpine had continued with how they were doing from the start of the year, they might have been one of my favourites, possibly for an A2. But I think Racing Bulls is well worthy of that A, and I really look forward to seeing what comes on the second half of this season. So that brings us to the end of our ratings and this episode of Pit Lane Talk. We've only got a couple of weeks to go until Zandvoort, and we'll be back breaking down everything that happened both on and off the track after that. Hopefully see you soon.